and welcome to Sunday. Don't know where in the world you are or which state you're in, but it should be Sunday for majority of people right now. My name is Mary Pryor. It says here my Twitter handle. For some of us have it, but please shout it out just in case you cannot see it. Today's going to be a great chat. Hopefully you already know the topic. I mean, essentially, we are all amazing women of color, and not just women of color, but literally all representations as much as possible, talking about our industries within tech, digital, and advertising and design. STEM, STEAM, equally represented here, and we are excited to make this as conversational as possible. What do I do? So I am a social media editor over at SheKnows, and we are also proudly sponsoring this chat. We've been major supporters of all things involving women, especially this year. Even I, as a woman of color, have found SheKnows to be really supportive of finding and being very honest about diversity and making sure representation is noted. So that's a rarity in this business, but it can happen. I also run my own boutique agency called Urban Socialista, and I have a myriad of clients that I've worked with, from Red Bull to Samsung to Beta to New York City to Microsoft to AT&T. So that's been my own thing, and whether it's been designing hackathons or promoting hackathons or social media strategy, I'm really all about making people that look like me or close to me or in the diaspora that is resemblant to me or Asian or Indian get jobs and also be able to have a vagina, which is pretty much real. Just keeping it a buck. So let's start with Christina, who knows that I'm a live shit when it comes to talking about representation in digital media, but she does great stuff too, so we'll go according to the bottom and below. Christina, kick us off.
Hi, so I'm Christina, also known as Divine Techie Girl on Twitter. By day, I do information security and identity and access management for currently Morgan Stanley. By night, I am co-founder of Women of Color in Tech Chat with Stephanie Morillo, who's to my left, I think, right? I don't know. And yeah, I'm also a mom. I have 3 kids. I'm married. I work full time. Balance is bullshit before you ask, and so forth and so on. So I'm very happy to be here.
Next up, we have, thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Honey, who I guess if I can call her by her government name, I'm not allowed to, but hopefully she'll tell you. I mean, if she wants you to know her government name, she'll tell you. So go forth.
Hi, everybody. My name is Honey, but my government name is Sarah Honey Young, but I do go by Honey. I am really just want to say I'm really honored to be speaking with you guys, just on a professional level as well as one of the organizers of this conference. I'm really extremely emotional right now, but I'm going to be a thug. I've been in the design industry for 16 years now. I started when I was still in college. I went to Howard University, and to say the landscape has changed exponentially since I began is an understatement. Like, when I started designing, there was no such thing as web design as a major. Like, that wasn't even a thing that happened. It was just something that we did on the side. But I've worked for Viacom, I've worked for Vibe Magazine, I've worked for Live Nation, but last year I started freelancing again. I moved from New York to Pittsburgh and started an agency called Supreme Clientele. And I've been really blessed to have awesome clients, to be doing amazing projects like Women's Freedom Conference, for example, and really just talking with you girls. It's exciting to me. I'm a little frazzled because I have not slept in 48 hours. So please bear with me. But thank you so much for doing this, Mary, and I'm looking forward to this. You're on mute, Mary.
I knew I was on mute. Sorry. I'm literally trying to tell the world to tune in. Let's keep the intro train going, please. Next up, Jamila.
Hi, I'm Jamila Aisha Brown. I am the digital strategist at the Opportunity Agenda by day. The Opportunity Agenda is a communications lab that trains social justice leaders in media and communications to help shift the narrative to more progressive topics. And I'm also the co-founder, well, the founder, and the lead strategist at Q, which is my company, which is really dumb because I'm really bad at pronouncing H's. Given my Caribbean and Latina background, I don't know why I named an organization Hugh, but it's specifically reaching out to and creating digital campaigns for organizations throughout the African diaspora. So I've been doing digital strategy work all over the world for the past 5-6 years. I've been working in South Africa, Israel, Palestine, Cuba, you name it, I've probably been there. But it's been just a really incredible and powerful experience to see how women of color around the world are using digital and ways in which to plug in and ways in which now the development community is really trying to get women of color online as well. So that's what I'm extremely passionate about, and kind of taking the imperialism in addition to the sexism, racism, and other isms out of tech.
I was saying next up, fantastic. Thank you for joining us. Lisa, you are next.
All right, I just unmuted myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Lee, and I lead diversity initiatives at Pandora Radio. I say Pandora Radio because there's also Pandora bracelets, and I don't want people to get confused with that. I've been in the tech industry for the last 10 plus years. At night, though, I am one of the Bay Area chapter leaders for National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, as well as a board member for Asian Americans for Civil Rights and Equality. And yes, Asian Americans are fighting for civil rights and equality as well, along with our other wonderful communities of color. I'm also a co-founder of Thick Dumpling Skin. It's a website that addresses body image issues and eating disorders within the Asian American community. So very, very honored to be here with these amazing, amazing women to talk about the state of diversity in tech and also how we can continue to push the agenda forward.
You're my new hero. That's an amazing website. I'm going to add it to my list of things to visit. Shannon.
Hi. I didn't expect that. Hi, guys. I'm Shannon Washington. I am a digital creative director at an agency by the name of Invent, where I produce integrated experiences for, wow, a lot of clients, like Intel and Pepsi. Before that, I was a digital creative director at Gray, New York, good old Gray, where I did a lot of global digital strategy and creative for brands like Pandora, the jewelry, Pantene, and my God, a lot of other folks. I have a lot of brands, you know, in my arsenal, but what I don't have is a lot of Black girls. I pretty much am here as to kind of make the case for having more of us in that boardroom with me. I just met my first Black female creative director in my space last year, and I've been in this business for over 10 years. Like Honey, I am a proud Howard University graduate. And before all of that, I was a designer. And so at the end of the day, I'm all about the design and working with women across this thing that you see here to get us all to the top.
Thank you for joining us, Shannon. We appreciate it. And we have Stephanie, who is up, and I guess that'll be our wrapped up of intros, right?
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Morillo. I'm a copywriter at a cloud infrastructure company called DigitalOcean in New York. I've been in the tech industry for almost 4 years now. I started learning how to program when I was actually in between jobs. A good friend of mine, also a Latino from the Bronx, I'm from the Bronx, taught me how to code, and through that I've basically tried to make my inroads in the New York City tech community. I've spoken at various tech conferences. I've written a few thought pieces for the publication Model View Culture around diversity in tech, working in communities of color, mental health, and other issues. And I also co-founded the Women of Color in Tech Chat with Christina, which is a monthly Twitter chat where women of color from across tech, not just software developers, but people who do QA, who do non-technical roles, InfoSec, basically just convene and talk about things that are of interest to us.
Thank you. That's all amazing. Thank you all again for being a part of this, and let's get down to the nitty-gritty. So it's pretty much like we all pretty much described, you know, what we've done and what we're doing, and some ideas of as to how the space is, but it'd be great if someone could share just a reality check as to how women are kind of like living and present in this space, either present largely or not really. So I know we all kind of like found an interesting stat to share to kind of like show why this conversation is needed. So I'll ask Christina to share something that's relevant to the tech space for women of color, and if everyone else can just like chime in, that'd be great.
So I have two stats that I wanted to share, which I thought was just like phenomenal and kind of saddening. In 2014, only 3% of the computing workforce were African American, 5% were Asian, and 1% Latina. And also, women of color face significant wage gaps, and the statistics are Asian American women still make 79 cents, Black women make 64 cents, and Hispanic women make 56 cents for every dollar paid to a white non-Hispanic male. And that's coming from the White House Report on Women and Girls of Color. So I found that extremely maddening and frustrating.
It is. Anyone else can chime in? Shannon?
Sorry, guys. The mute button is just so far from my thumb. You know, in my field, and our fields are very, very integrated, but, you know, there's a very popular stat when it comes to the number of working creative directors in the U.S., and that is 3%. And I believe that was as of 2011 or 2012. That's actually risen to 11.5%, which you would think is good. However, no one has ever actually bothered to research out of that 11.5%, how many of those are women of color. It's estimated that as a group, we're probably between 4 and 5%. As African American or Black women specifically, we're still at about 1%. There's a popular nickname that people like to give to us, which are unicorns, in the sense we could probably all fill a passenger van, maybe, at this point. But, you know, it really does speak to the level of no one has bothered to even research the groups within that 11.5%. However, we kill when it comes to consumerism. We kill when it comes to startups. We kill when it comes to entrepreneurship. And so you see that disconnect really does come from the top down.
Thank you, Shannon, for sharing that. Jamila, Lisa, either one of you want to share?
Yeah, I can jump in here. So, you know, I think there are lots of interesting and also frustrating stats. And, you know, I'll stick to the Asian American angle. I think the narrative currently out there is that Asians and Asian Americans are doing, quote unquote, really, really well in tech, and that we are, you know, overrepresented and essentially most of the time lumped into the Caucasian population. And what I'm really interested in is, first of all, the disaggregation of data and how that is not happening, right? So there are over, you know, 48 different languages and cultures represented in that Asian box, but that's not being recognized. And, you know, where is that representation sitting in the company, in the tech workforce. So currently there are about only 2% of Asians and Asian Americans in executive seats in tech companies at the Fortune 500 level. And, you know, I don't even know what that breakdown is when it comes to men versus women, slash, you know, people who identify as others. And then one more, just in general, diversity in tech, we're seeing, you know, 18% of Hispanic and Latinos and Black and African Americans graduating with CS degrees across the U.S., yet there are only 5 to 7% of them in the actual workforce. So it's just frustrating to hear that people talk about, you know, the pipeline is broken, the pipeline is broken. And yes, it is broken for a variety of different reasons, but it's not that broken where 50% of our CS graduates are not getting jobs in the tech industry doing what they studied. So I just think those two stats are really good stats to ground us in this conversation.
So those are all sad stats, right? And unfortunately, I don't really have any like positive stats to offset that, because everything that you ladies have brought up is extremely true. And just to, you know, be honest, there's women within this collective where we've talked about like, wow, we're the only one either as a spot in the room that might be Black, brown, yellow, or anything in that like spectrum, or we're just literally one of few vocal women in the room that aren't afraid to like be out there and like show that we know what we're talking about. But with that being said, what kind of guided you towards being able to make a place in this industry for yourself, right? So let's say if you started out doing something where you might have fallen into engineering through college, or you fell into it after college, like Stephanie mentioned, or you decided to like, let's say you went straight for the legal route, but then you found yourself going into this from there, or from the beginning of time. For myself, I started learning how to code in the 6th grade, and that was only because of a program called DAPSEP out of Detroit, Michigan, to where they were like cultivating students to be more so into like engineering and computer science. So without that, literally I remember before 5th grade, I was going to be a lawyer. And then after that, all of that changed. But there are programs like that that aren't really well talked about or well known. But, you know, like if we could talk about resources, what are the resources that allowed you to get where you are or to get where you want to go? And I think I'll ask Stephanie to kind of like talk about her situation a little bit, because it seems like coding fell onto you after college or after high school.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I actually started coding, doing like very basic HTML and CSS when I was 12 years old, and the reason for that was I grew up in the Bronx, and the Bronx was definitely not the place to be in 1998. And my parents didn't want us outside, so he bought me a desktop computer that my brother and I would basically use to play on. I mean, we had internet, and I started building websites then. But there was really no way to kind of there was a barrier, right? So I didn't know that there was anything above that, there was anything beyond that, and really there was nobody in my neighborhood, in my vicinity to coach me. There wasn't an understanding that there is a way to make that a career. Like the only people that we had that were professionals, and I've talked about this extensively in my neighborhood, were teachers, you know, healthcare professionals like nurses, and people who worked in administrative and civic servant roles. Like we didn't have engineers come to my school on career day when I was growing up, and we certainly didn't have anyone that we could look up to that made us feel that we could be that. And I think coming from a low-income community of color, a lot of kids, like we internalize this belief that you have to be super, super, super smart to be able to be an engineer or something, because a lot of us aren't even aware of what's out there. I remember going to college, and I went to a predominantly white institution, and I remember being 18 years old and having a kid tell me, a freshman, I want to be a chemical engineer. And I'm here like, well, what's that? I never knew what a chemical engineer was, and there certainly wasn't anyone in my surroundings that could really orient me. So it wasn't until I was 26 years old that a good friend of mine who didn't go to college, he actually got he went through a few institutes and started doing IT and taught himself how to program. It wasn't until a Dominican, just like myself from the Bronx, was like, hey, you should try out this coding thing and this programming thing. It really took somebody from my neighborhood, somebody who came from a similar background as me, to say, this is actually a way for you. Otherwise, I would have never considered development. I would have never considered coding. I've always been very hypersensitive about being a woman of color in professional spaces. I feel that there's a lot of adapting that you have to do when you enter the professional space through code switching and other mechanisms, basically to be able to cope. And I didn't see many women of color that were engineers, and certainly none that I think would, I don't know, I just wasn't around them. So it really took having somebody that was from a similar background, even though he was a man, to kind of get me there. And then once I got in, I started to notice how few women of color there were, and I became very vocal, and I became angry. And to be honest, the anger was really what drove me to learn and to try to seek out opportunities for myself. Because once I started getting scholarships to attend tech conferences, and once I started speaking at conferences, and once I realized that there weren't many people like us, that there weren't many, specifically Blacks and Latinas, those are the two groups that I focus on the most, that there weren't many of us, I decided that I really wanted to get these opportunities for myself so that I could help somebody, so that I can then, you know, pave the way for someone else, because I certainly don't want younger women of color, not just that, but older women of color who are thinking about transitioning to the tech industry, to do it blindly and to do it without feeling that support. I think having that support, that mentorship from other women of color who understand and who can really empathize with you on a level that sometimes you don't need to speak, right? There's like this unspoken, there's this understanding about what it is to be a woman of color in this industry. And I think that that's very, very important. So really anger has been the driver, and really wanting this so that people in my community can thrive.
Have, in terms of colleges, like prepping you, and thank you so much for keeping it real, Stephanie. I'm going to ask Sarah to kind of chime in on, did she feel that, and nothing to say anything against Howard at all, but did you feel that college then prepped you when you attended at the time for where you're at now? And if so, and if not, what are the additional resources that you were able to leverage to make sure that you had the proper like setup for where you wanted to go in terms of being like a creative, being someone that had an eye for web design, being someone that like code and has built some major, you know, well-known sites and properties for people?
Thank you. Well, first of all, HU.
Okay.
So, you know, I had to get that one in.
Well, Michigan is here. I just want to represent for my school. Thank you.
So honestly, I think I'm coming from a different sort of situation, because I actually didn't study art or design at Howard at all. Like Shannon said, it starts with the design. It's always been about the design. I've been an artist my entire life. My dad was extremely artistic. My grandfather was a professional artist, and I actually majored in acting at Howard. I went to become a famous actress, and it was kind of choosing between two loves, because I've always loved, you know, the theater as well. But in terms of, so I guess it's hard for me to really answer fairly whether Howard would have given me like a proper sort of introductory or a proper helpful push into the design industry. Also, you know, I have to like reiterate that web design, which is, you know, where I started, I'm a creative director now, but web design was just really not a major at all. Like, I'm that old that it really wasn't a thing that was offered at all whatsoever. But I will say that kind of hopping on the internet at like the advent and the growth of like the internet, like I was on the internet like pre-social media, I think that was almost like my education into, you know, kind of everything I'm doing now, because that's when I met the majority of the people I'm connected with now. That's when I really discovered I had a platform, because I was kind of coming at art from a platform of being a Black woman, but also being a plus-size Black woman. And I started out with my first site, thatbitch.com. I wanted to showcase big, voluptuous women in an extremely artistic way. I saw a lot of white dudes pulling photos of Jessica Alba out of Maxim magazine, and I said, all right, but I want to feature women that, quite frankly, look like me. You know, I want voluptuous, sexy women presented in a way that's not overtly sexual, or it's not for the male gaze. And I really wanted to kind of exemplify that as art. And so that was my focus at first. And so I think my growth in the design industry has been an interesting one, because I kind of came on before it was really a thing that people said. Like I don't even know if I started out calling myself a web designer at first, but I do want to echo Stephanie in saying that kind of anger is a driving force, because when I moved to Pittsburgh, I really just took a shot in the dark, even though this is a very, very, very white city, quite frankly. I was like, I wonder if there are any Black women-owned agencies in Pittsburgh, because it actually is a burgeoning tech city. There's a Google here, and there's a couple of strong agencies here. Zero of them are owned by Black women. That was my stat. And so that's kind of why I decided to strike out with Supreme Clientele, because that's ridiculous to me. You know, Shannon had touched on the fact that sort of Black women are sort of the leaders in what's hot. And so people love, like, what we do. They love our lips. They love our shape. They love our skin color. They love what we do with our hair, but they don't necessarily put us on the teams that are leading, you know, the advertising for those sort of things, and like shaping it from the perspective of a Black woman specifically. So that's really was my goal, you know, up to this point in my career, was I want to represent myself as a Black woman, as plus size, and I want to be the one who is controlling the message.
Thank you. Thank you. Yay. I mean, not yay. Damn, but damn, like people, like, and I'll be honest, like, people really don't know how real it is to be Black or brown or Asian or Indian and be a leader in the space, and literally be like the only one in the room that will either catch someone saying something absolutely ridiculous, or be in the room and be like, I gotta lift up everybody in my neighborhood to be where I'm at, because I'm by myself, or on your block or whatever. So my next question is gonna really point to Lisa and Jamila about, how are you able to leverage what you're doing now, or trying to leverage what you're doing now, in order to bring people that can resemble you, or resemble your cultural background, or just resemble the fact that you're a woman and you want to see people rise and where you're working. And Lisa, you can start first.
So I actually didn't start out doing diversity when I was working in tech. Before I was with Facebook for a number of years, I actually was working on operations and product, and got into diversity because my whole life has been really grounded in community work. I grew up in Taiwan, in South Africa, and have just really, I think, witnessed sort of firsthand what happens when people are prohibited from achieving their full potential. So I sort of fell into doing diversity in tech kind of by accident, but also not by accident, just because it's what I saw and it was what I was really passionate about. And I started to see my role as more of how can I organize and bridge that gap, because I know what's going on in the community, and how can I bring that information back to these essentially campuses, where we're living in bubbles. I think the interesting part about my work right now is so many different people are coming to understand their own identity, and I mean, gender and racial identity at different places. So what I found to be really kind of fun, if you will, it's more of me figuring out how to make my work fun, but it's figuring out the messages that really resonate with different people who are at different points on that journey. For some people, it's really about a morality issue. Like we need to see more people of color because of the history of this country, because of the institutionalized laws that have prohibited people from advancing, right? So that really speaks to some people. For some others, it's about the business case. It's about how is this going to help your bottom line? And as this country changes, and the landscape of consumers change, and what we see on mass media starts to change, people really see that as, oh, you're right. If Hispanic Latinos are growing extremely fast, so is the Asian American community. The buying power of the African American community continues to rise. Absolutely, in order to be a successful business, we have to stay ahead of that. And for some, it's both. This is the right thing to do, and also, this is about what kind of a company we really want to be in the long run. So the way that I've had to bring people along with me is first of all, just listen, understand what people's experiences are. Some people grew up in really diverse neighborhoods. Some people not at all. They are the people that have, a 98% white social network, and they're living, day to day in all of these biases that they're not even aware of. So I think the interesting part of my job is really meeting people where they are, and then, bringing them along to where I need them to be.
Thank you. And that's mad real. Jamila, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I actually started doing tech through diversity. So I actually have degrees in international relations, and I had no idea that I would be doing any sort of digital advocacy work, but I was working for Howard University and working as a computer director in 2 public housing projects. And we had all these young people that were just crazy about music. All they wanted to do was use the computers to listen to music. So I was like, look, we can actually make our own music. Like, we can use these computers to do beats. You can rhyme, you can do go-go, you can do whatever you want, but you got to market it and you got to send it out into the world. So I taught myself Twitter and Facebook and MySpace and SoundCloud and all of these other platforms and features just to really work with these young people. And what you discover, working on the nonprofit side of things, and I think I'm probably the only person here who works more in like digital advocacy in that space, is that you have a lot of well-meaning white people who don't want to confront or are struggling to confront their own white privilege. And for me, it was extremely difficult to even find statistics about people of color working in my space because, the story that we tell ourselves is that, oh, well, we're doing much better than corporate America. Well, but we're working with all of these different people. And I can tell you, stories upon stories of stories. I worked with a nonprofit organization that is very much so entrenched in the tech space and is a global organization. And they think they're doing well on diversity because they're global, but they don't do well when it comes to domestic diversity. And I was literally fighting, in a meeting about adding a line about Muslim Americans are being surveilled, and was told, oh, well, we're not a civil rights organization, that does that kind of work. And I'm like, one line in a press release, really? Like a couple of tweets, a few messages? Those are the things that need to be done. Like the acknowledgement that these issues that we work on affect people of color worst and first, always, all around the world, is extremely important. We need more people in the spaces talking about these things, and there are wonderful fellowships that are coming out, like the Kairos Fellowship, and the deadline for the Kairos Fellowship is actually today. So I want to lift that up. So it's a fellowship specifically focused on people of color in the digital campaigning sphere, which is what I work in. It's a step, but diversity isn't enough. Like, we always stop at, oh, well, there's more people of color, but what kind of jobs do those people of color have? Usually it's you're on the lower rung. You're not running the department. You're not the director of digital. I can't tell you how many times I look at nonprofit organizations and their director of digital does not look like me. And they're running campaigns that are supposed to, you know, specifically focused on people who look like me and are for people like me. But, you know, you have to have that inside information. You have to have that understanding, that grounding and compassion. So for me, you know, I'm at the point where it's like, okay, diversity, but what's next? Like, are you fostering environments for people of color, for women of color, for gender non-variant people of color, where it's a protective space so that we feel protected and we don't have to deal with the bullshit of microaggression on a day-to-day basis, and you feel like you're fighting a battle every time you go into the office?
Legit. So, I mean, this is a great conversation, but it's also like you have to sit back and be like, oh my gosh, what can we do to especially have men feel like they should be allies, or even charge them to be allies, and even charge people that are non-people of color to be allies, and not just wanting diversity in terms of we got 3 black people here, everybody else here white, y'all deal with that, but focus on making environments like authentically inclusive. Because when I talk to men about this, they're like, well, you made it, you know, like we need to find more women like you. And I'm like, there are tons of women like me out here that can get a job. I don't know why you would say that to my face, but the point is that you're not doing anything to target women of color in these areas. And when you say that you do, you think that you get 1 out of like 10 in a company that represents 500, and you feel like you're good. And that's not how this game works. So what could we, like, what would you tell a man, or someone who's a white woman or a white male, or someone who even a black male who just doesn't get it and feels like, well, I'm on top, I don't want nobody else to get near me, which is real as well, not to call out men, but what can we do to help them understand how important this is? And I'll ask Christina to chime in on that if she can.
So I don't have all the answers, but what I can say is the first thing they can do is shut up and listen. And whether you're black, white, whatever man you are, nationality or whatever, shut up and listen to what we're saying. Because a lot of times you guys, you know, are too, like, a little bit passive aggressive, like, well, no, that's not the same, you know, that hasn't been my experience. So just listen to what we're saying and try to digest it. And the second thing I would say is give your money to initiatives like this that are doing something about it. Because if you don't have the answers, there are people that are, you know, laying the groundwork and working towards, you know, diversity, inclusion, and other fantastic initiatives. Give us your money, like today, like now, you know, or share, amplify. That's how you can be an ally. And I do have to shout out 2 allies that actually come to mind. One being Anil Dash, who does a tremendous job of just amplifying women of color and really like fighting for us. So he's like amazing, and shout out to him. And also Wayne Sutton, who I haven't actually had the pleasure of meeting, but he recently had a tech inclusion conference in San Fran, and I'm hoping he brings this to New York because I think we really need it. But yeah, I think it's a matter of just like amplifying, shutting up, you know, shut up, listen to us, please, and give us your money, like, so that we can do it. If you don't have the answers, fine. We have some answers, and we can, you know, we can amplify, we can connect to our people. So yeah.
Thank you. I can't wait to have Shannon answer this question, because Shannon is in that advertising game and it's lit. It's so lit in terms of this topic. You know, and just to, you know, if you're just tuning in, everybody here is like represented from like the heavy tech, like I'm a coder in these streets angle, to advertising, to digital creative, to diversity initiatives, to social media. So, you know, we all, for right now, I think, are able to speak to this. But in advertising, it really is a different beast when it comes to the question of how can men or non-people of color be allies in supporting diversity and inclusion. So I can't wait for Shannon. This is like I literally can't wait for this answer. I'm so excited. Shannon, I'd love for you to kind of speak on this from where you're at in the industry.
What you see on my face is trying to figure out how to keep my job.
I know. I want you to keep a job. I want here. The main goal here is for everybody to keep their job. But like,
no. Actually, I work at a very, very wonderful agency, and if they're watching, I love you guys. Well, let's unpack that a little bit. I'm going to speak to just non-people of color because the issue of men could divert into another conversation. And I don't want to hog the whole conversation, but as a whole, you know, advertising, like, I mean, just design as a whole, tech as a whole, all these creative industries that we're talking about, you're your best when you're your best self, when you can bring all of yourself to whatever the problem that it is that you're solving. Because whether it's UX design for an app, whether it's figuring out, you know, what a program is, whether it's figuring out an ad campaign, all we're doing is problem solving at its very, very core level, right? And so the key is creating an environment everyone can feel like they can be seen. And so, you know, we've probably heard this before in our own industries. I love when someone tells me that they don't see color. If there's one thing that I learned at Howard University is undeniable blackness. I could black off anyone. I could like out-black most black people, in my opinion. And I say that because I know that I come from such a creativity-laden point of view with that blackness in mind, that brings a singular, not a singular, but a very unique point of view on how I approach the world and how I approach my work. But with that said, I don't deny someone else that opportunity as well. And that's, in my opinion, has been the best way to open up that conversation on creating more inclusive environments and having people kind of see it for what it is. Just because at the end of the day, in a lot of the boardrooms that I'm in, the good idea is going to rise to the top, no matter what. And you know, it's hard, but with the exception of when you're actually focusing on an actual group, in a sense, where if you're doing something that caters to a Latino audience, something that caters to an African American audience or an Asian audience, at its core, if it sucks, it sucks. And that really doesn't have any color. Now here's where it gets tricky. The denial of problems. Just like you were saying. But we have like 3 black folks in here, and we know we've got our Asian. And, you know, but do you allow that person to really be their whole selves when they come to work? What, you know, when you say something to the effect of, well, you know, Ann Coulter, you know, just thinking about like water cooler talk, right? Ann Coulter, oh, she just does it for TV. You know, she's da-da-da-da-da. You just legitimize someone who I consider to be a terrorist. And how does that make me feel when you want me to actually bring my full self to the creative process? Because, you know, and a lot of creators will, you know, chime in, we always pull from personal experience. My personal experience has literally gone from like projects to penthouses. And so, you know, if I'm pulling, you know, a cultural reference or sometimes I have to unpack it and explain it. But just like I may not understand what it's like to grow up with a membership to a country club, and I ask you to explain it, and I do it on purpose because we're going to let you know that is not the norm. In that space, whiteness has been the cultural norm. But now we're in a place where that doesn't work anymore. And so when you approach it, I find that it works for me when you approach it in a sense of, okay, you have these people in the room. What are you not doing, or what are you doing and not realizing that is either hindering or helping them be their full creative self? That basically gives them room to fail and gives them an opportunity to kind of reveal themselves. You know, you learn a lot of people when you learn a lot about a lot of people when you're brainstorming, and you kind of can figure out where they're coming from. But you have to create an environment that every single one of those pieces of them, that's what it really is, you're able to legitimize it. And it's not something that, because you don't understand, it's not important. You know, that could be the one thing that helps you win. And it's interesting that you said men, because just to be very clear, I mean, very frank, I have most of those conversations with women. I really don't have them with men, to be honest with you. And I've had a few, but I've always found that in my field, the barrier is a little low to men. And I have a feeling it's just because of, I'm new. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm still new to a lot of people. You know, and I believe that there is a willingness. It's a double-edged sword in a way, but there definitely is a willingness, more of a curiosity in a way that I have to twist from going into a very dark place into a very good place and saying, okay, you want to know where I'm coming from. I'm going to educate you about all this culture talk and everything that I'm coming from. Core resistance, it kind of teeter-totters, but my core resistance really tends to come from a lot of women, to be honest with you. But I think the best thing that we can do, and whether it makes someone uncomfortable or not, you know, let me back that up. The worst thing that you can do is not bring yourself to work, especially in my room. You know, and in that creative room, like, first you have to feel comfortable within yourself, but like that undeniable XX-ness of yourself, whether it's blackness, whiteness, you know, Asianness, transgenderness, you know, that is the one thing that if you're an authentic, when you're your authentic self, you really do a lot of teaching without teaching, because you have a lot of people who don't think that they need to learn anything. But they pick up things and then they're able to, like, you know, walk away with it and say, okay, well, you know, not all, and I hate to say, like, well, not all X, but, you know, you become a little bit of a marker in the sense of, like, all right, whether she said it or not, I think that I can feel more comfortable in making a decision to open up our, say, recruitment pool to this school per se. I didn't go to Howard isn't a design school per se. But, you know, you have a lot of companies who are actually looking at that university now, not because of me, but just because people are starting to realize that these small little pools that you're pulling from, there ain't a lot of hot people there. The hotness is in the places that are creating culture. And those are what makes the winds in the room. But you can't do that if you're not yourself. And so from the side of, you know, the other, like myself, you know, you have to, it's a bit of a struggle, but you have to really, really kind of own your, like I said, your X-ness in that room. And from the other end, you have to create a space that allows for everybody to do that. And then when there's a conflict, you have to address it, whether it's with the full room or just those people, because oftentimes we use a lot of words to mislabel things. And you'll find that you have way more in common than you think. And that was my very semi-politically correct, sanitized, non-alcohol infused way of answering that question.
You did some great, like, pivoting. You even did a ballroom hustle around some things, and I'm really impressed. Ballroom hustle is a Detroit thing. Just putting that there for those that have no idea what I just said. That was a really good, clean answer. That was good. That was. And I know we don't have a lot of time left, so I don't know what the next question will be. I'm a little nervous. Sarah, do I have time for one more, or should I just be like, throw it to Twitter? One more? Okay. So the last question I have, when I wrote down 9 and I only did 4, and I'm sorry for the audience, but we had a lot of great answers here, is the leaning in component of our chat. As professionals, we're all told to do this whole leaning in thing, which, as someone who serves on the board of Lean In NYC, I get it. It sounds great in theory. But for women of color, we can't exactly lean in the way that leaning in is telling us to mostly lean in. For those that can, that's great. But I know when I read that book, and from the chats that I've had with women, non-women of color and women of color, that experience is totally different. Same thing can be said for feminism and why we need to throw the word black feminism in front of feminism, or Latina feminism in front of feminism, which to me makes that term so, like, interesting. Is there anyone here that can speak to how they are leaning in professionally in their career? And I'm mainly thinking about not just like women with families here, but like women that are in relationships or women that have a big social community connectivity outside of work. Like, how are you able to still be a go-getter, ascend, and stay grounded if for someone that doesn't necessarily subscribe to that concept? Whoever wants to speak up, go first.
I'm happy to jump in, but if Christina wants to answer, I'm happy to let her too.
Well, I know we have to wrap up, so I'll give a short and sweet answer. I'm still figuring it out. There is no like, this is it. I found the way. Lean In was a great book, but after I read it, I was like, oh, this is cute. Yeah, it doesn't apply to me because I've had my share of struggles, and I still do, right? So like, you just have to find what works. Community has been a blessing because there's some days where even today, like I'm stressed, and well, not today specifically, but like I have to cry, I have to lean on other people's shoulders and just try to figure it out. It's just a matter of like figuring it out. Some days the anger drives me, some days my kids are motivators, but that's a tough one. But the book was cute. It was cute.
Really quick.
Book reviews by women of color, cute. Cute can be a term you don't want to apply to your life, people, in case you think that cute really means what it is. You might want to do some urban dictionaryism around the fluidity of the word cute. Stay woke. Lisa, you can chime in.
Let me just really quickly, because I know we have to end. I've pivoted the idea of lean in to be more about how we can lean into our discomfort, all of us. And it goes without saying, women of color have been leaning in for years. So let's get that out of the way. Now, I empathize with the people that I work with who don't understand our experiences. There has to be empathy there. So how do we as a community lean into that discomfort of continuing to push the boundaries and bringing our full selves to work? So I've made it my challenge to always slip in some personal experiences. Like, oh, you whisk eggs with this tool? Well, I do it with chopsticks, and it's really effective, right? Or my parents growing up did this. My parents never packed me lunches. They never dropped me off at school, right? So I think just finding daily opportunities to be educating people in a way that they're not realizing, exactly like what Shannon said. It's kind of stealth mode. You're doing it with a spoonful of sugar, but I think it's very necessary for us to continue telling our stories and continue sharing our experiences.
All right. So we have thank you and keeping it real on that. So we approximately have 30 seconds to say all the projects we're working on or give a positive limerick about what they can do. So I'm gonna make it quick, and then we have to say where people can find you. So shout out your Twitter handle if people want to ask you questions. Say you're open to answering them on Twitter. That'd be great. So I'll go first to make it really quick. What am I working on? So at SheKnows, we're doing a lot of stuff behind our advertising stuff over with trying to talk about the inclusiveness or lack of attention and therefore focused attention that needs to be placed on how we advertise women or how we focus on women in the advertising space. We do a award ceremony, which we started this year, on advertisers that totally get how to speak and make the women's voice really popular and like do a good job. And we're also running with SheKnows 100, which is a entire thing focused on 100 inspiring women for the next few months. Right. Yet last month we focused on education. This was focusing on tech. As for myself, I'm still working with private clients. I'm still at SheKnows, but I'm a real big supporter of hackathons and design. So I have that coming up with BuzzFeed in concert with Camp Interactive or Code Interactive now. And I'm always available and able to talk about anything that involves like digital or how to get a job or where to get a job or anything like that. You just hit me up on Twitter. My handle's right there. Next up, Christina, go.
Okay, just real quick. Stephanie and I just wrapped up the first Women of Color in Tech photo shoot in New York City, and that this is for the sole purpose of stock images of women of color in tech. We're going to do it again. If your company wants to sponsor, donate, whatever, holla at me, Divine Techie Girl on Twitter.
Next up, gonna have Jamila.
Hey. So find me on Twitter. I am Ms. Jamila Aisha, so that's MSJAMILA It's long. I apologize. My organization I work for, the Opportunity Agenda, we actually just finished working with Usher on his song Chains. So we helped do the messaging around that. Make sure you please look at the video if you can. It's a great song and statement on focusing on police brutality and how to stop the killings of Black people by the police. So definitely check that out. As far as me, you can see me at Q Global. It's dormant right now, but I'm going to be doing some more stuff. I just moved. Be patient with me. But I also just finished an Afro-Latino storytelling event at the Schomburg Center earlier this month for Latino Heritage Month. I do not call it Hispanic. That's a different story. But again, just find me on Twitter at Miss Jamila Aisha.
Sarah.
You're going to stop calling me Sarah. Okay, on Twitter, I am at HUNY. Again, no sleep at all, ever. My business is supremeclientele.co, not .com, .co, because that's that new shit. And I just wrapped lostqueens.com. I'm doing 1839mag.com, which is sort of a Black creative, Black arts sort of Pittsburgh-focused entity. I am the creative director of Women's Freedom Conference. And what's the fourth one? Oh, and another thing is, if you are a Black girl designer or developer, please hit me up, because I have something called the Black Girl Designer Voltron that I'm forming that's going to be kind of a collective of women like us who want to basically take over the world, because that is my goal. The end. At Honey.
Fantastic. Thank you, Honey. Thank you, Jamila. Let's go Lisa, Shannon, and Stephanie in that order.
Okay, so we are in the midst of heavy university recruiting at Pandora. Not my team, but I work very closely with them. If you are a engineer who is trying to get an internship for next summer, or once you graduate, look us up, please. It's an amazing place to work. I've been there for almost 2 years now and still living the honeymoon. And we will be kicking into our business internship and new college grad recruiting later on at the end of this year and also beginning of next year. Honestly, actually working on self-care, taking care of myself, trying to spend more time with family. I think it's something that this community really needs to continue reminding ourselves. We have to take care of ourselves, take care of our loved ones, so that we can continue to serve the larger cause. So I hope everybody is going to take some time to really put themselves first.
Fantastic. Thank you. Shannon.
Okay, you can always interact with me on Twitter, Twitter, at the address you see below, at Shan Boogie with 2 N's. Currently, I am pretty much living, and that is pretty much my activism right now, in the sense of I am looking for every fierce, fly, women of color creative. Our network is amazing, but our network in the space that I'm working in is not. And our network in the advertising space is all about connections. And so the connections that you can reach out, if your work is hot, I want to see it. And really, really trying to target, who are going to be like the creative forces of the future. We definitely need you in our space. And Mary, I know you were talking about before leaning in. I don't lean in, I lean back. And that means self-care. And my self-care is Parlor Magazine, which is travel. So you can always talk to me on @Parlor Magazine as well. I'm the voice behind that. Yeah, my lean back is definitely my passport. Self-care, taking care of yourself, seeing the world, challenging yourself. Go eat at a restaurant alone. I don't know, have a one-night stand. I didn't really mean that, but I kind of did. Just really, 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 really challenge yourself, because you are going to bring your A game when you get back to work on Monday.
And that is amazing. And one quick point. Leaning back and self-care is major important. It was one of the questions that I had, and we didn't get a chance to cover it. So you have to take care of yourself. It's really key. I'll be honest. I am a Crohn's advocate. I have Crohn's disease. I'm one of the few Black women that actually will talk about it, because it's a real thing. But leaning back, taking care of yourself, not getting IBD, not getting stressed out, making sure your kids are okay is really key. There are some women in this group that have done amazing campaigns. I'm going to shout out Christina, and you should support her. Christina, if you could share your link about what you're going through with making sure your son is okay with stuff, that's great. But leaning in and taking care of yourself is really key. Not to dismiss that. I wish we had time for that, but please keep that in mind. No matter what you do, make sure you're cared for first. Stephanie, go ahead.
Yep, absolutely. So I am actually going to be doing not much over the next 4 months. I'm tasking myself with learning the Linux command line and trying to get my InfoSec game up. This is the 7th talk that I've given over the past 4 months. This month, I also co-organized the jQuery Developer Summit, which was a 3-day event to bring underrepresented people into open source. If you are a woman of color and you're interested in learning more about open source technology, please get in touch. Follow us at WOC in Tech Chat. And yeah, that's it. I'm on Twitter at Radio Morillo. And if you are at the University of Waterloo, I will be visiting you in March.
Waterloo? Get it? Waterloo? All right, sorry. So I guess that's it. Honey said we got to hurry up and get off. So I guess that's it. I'm so sorry that we didn't get a chance to get to questions. Really wanted to see that from folks, but please hit everybody up here. I'm sure they don't mind responding to you. Just don't like stalk anybody or start sending like trolling messages. Like there's no need to do that. You do that, you're going to get blocked. It's going to get lit. You don't want it. Thank you to everyone. Shout out to Sarah. Shout out to everybody at the Part Who's Women Freedom Conference. Shout out to Feminista Jones. Shout out to my city. I mean, I don't know what to really tell you. Shout out to SheKnows. Thank you, SheKnows, for supporting this. It's actually one of the few places in my career to where they actually care about not being jerks when it comes to making sure diversity is well represented. And that is a rarity in this business. I'm keeping it a buck. So thank you all. Please watch the rest of the conference from the comfort of your bed like I'm doing, because it's lit. And we will see you soon. Stay focused, stay positive. Bye, Wave. Bye.
Hey, you.